following podcast is recorded and produced by Emerge, a media creators co-op, in affiliation with the network at bicbp-radio.com.
Welcome to the Double Fist Punch podcast. Name such for inefficient ass beating.
I tried to beat somebody up with this, got my ass kicked. So
Don't.
Might be the fact I'm 5'7" and old, but I'm gonna blame it on the fist punch.
Yes, as an experienced fighter, I can say this doesn't work.
Well, it was research. It was research. So.
All right. So, firstly, I have some housekeeping.
All right.
So, last episode I said that there was an email address that you can send feedback to, DoubleFistPunchPodcast@gmail.com. Turns out, you're only allowed to have a certain number of email addresses in Gmail.
Really?
Yeah. And they're like, no, you can't. You can't verify this, so...
How many email addresses do you have, bro?
3.
You can only have 3? I've got like 5 on my computer.
Gmail addresses?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh.
But we'll have to.
Well,
yeah, I've got like 716, Urban Cow, my own.
But
like 4 or 5.
It's okay because we have the same email address, but at yahoo.com. So that's DoubleFistPunchPodcast@yahoo.com.
So reach out because we'd love to hear what you think.
You can send stuff there.
Yeah.
You're not going to be sending it to some random person. I have the email address. It's just I can't access it, so it's just going to sit, unlooked at.
Forever.
All right, so
cool. Well, we're dressed appropriately.
Yes.
Well, I guess I'm not. I'm like 100 years into the future.
Yes, he is 10 years into the past.
Yes.
I am 10 years into the past, but also 75 years into the literal future.
Yes. But our shirts came in, and I'm really happy with mine.
Yeah, it's very show accurate, especially on camera,
Yeah, I'm like, I mean, it comes, these are kind of cool for those people that are, I'm not going to endorse the website, but these are cool because these are changeable. They have like a zipper, so you can put on the different command grades or with different departments. And then I obviously just ordered the pin, and it didn't come with an undershirt, so I had to buy an undershirt, the mock, half mock turtleneck.
It still looks good, though.
No, I'm really happy. I was pretty happy with this. And I've never owned anything like this. My friends have picked on me over the years, even 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when people used to go to conventions and, put on the fake ears and all that stuff. Now cosplay is such a big thing. Yeah. Back then, you'd get a lot of shit for it. And but I'm like, this is the first time ever. I mean, I own T-shirts and sweatshirts and things, but I've never owned like a cosplay. So thank you for this.
Yeah, this is like the best cosplay thing I've ever owned. Like on camera. Well, it doesn't look completely accurate on camera, but
I think it looks really good though.
Pretty close.
On camera, it looks really good.
Yeah.
The yellow, because I know that did we talk about this on there or this off the air? But at some point, but it was a material that they found and then they died. So then they couldn't get that material ever again. It was like someone went to like a store and bought material and then didn't think about the fact oh shit, we're going to be doing this for a while. And so they had problems, and every time, I just read this morning, that every time they cleaned the uniforms, because under the rules for the actors, everything had to be cleaned after every usage, and it would shrink every time it was cleaned.
Yeah, I also read that this morning. I wonder if we read it from the same source.
So it's interesting.
Yeah, but we're here to talk about Star Trek.
We are here.
Yes.
And we're into 2 episodes, one I love and one I hate.
Yeah, the first episode is The Enemy Within. I'm trying to hold this in a way that...
So what I'm going to say, again, this is the VHS collection that I have. I think this one I bought probably at like a store at a mall that the mall doesn't exist, nor does that store.
What are you doing?
And but it's funny because if you look at the picture on it, this picture of William Shatner is not from this episode. It's from this episode, which we're going to get to next time. Like, Who's working? The back is fine. Those are episodes with the lovely dog. But he's literally wearing the outfit and this like even when this came out, I was like, what the heck? Like, who's making the sleeve for the VHS? Sorry.
I mean, well,
I'm a nitpicker. That was back in the day. We were called nitpickers. People that like complained about subtle little things, we were called nitpickers back in the day. And there's even a book called The Nitpicker's Guide to the Star Trek, like Nitpicker's Guide to the Galaxy. There's like that was the term back in the 70s and 80s.
I mean, hilariously, you can even see the back behind other Kirk.
Yeah, the
you
other.
can see the big robot that we'll discuss when we get to that episode.
Oh, that's right. There are 2 Kirks in that episode.
The old ones.
There's 2 Kirks in this episode.
I know. I forgot. That's why it didn't make sense to me.
I love Rock. It was one of my you didn't get in enough of Rock. We need more Rock. I want the Rock origin story show. That's what I want. So. All right, let's get into the enemy within.
Yep, and here is the synopsis from the back of the tin.
I got my brandy. I'm all ready to go.
A transporter malfunction causes Kirk to be split into separate beings, one compassionate, the other savage. Spock and McCoy suffer along with their friend as Kirk confronts a side of his nature no man should see. His only hope for survival is to reunite his 2 selves, but Kirk's passive half is losing the ability to make decisions. And a stranded landing party is slowly freezing to death on the planet below. This episode marks the birth of the Vulcan neck pinch and McCoy's now classic line, "He's dead, Jim." Air date October 6th, 1966.
Still not born yet. I'm getting there, but not yet.
We're getting there.
So
let's start with the dog, shall we?
So let's start with the dog. First, there's a problem with this episode that I think has to be addressed because it's very early in the canon. Shuttlecraft?
Yeah.
Escape pod?
Nothing.
I mean, obviously it's a plot device that they're stranded. And obviously eventually Star Trek did have shuttlecrafts. But obviously in all other sci-fi, including other Star Treks that come out now, shows before this that enterprises that exist before this show have shuttlecrafts and pods. But apparently everybody forgot because there's a shuttle bay. It's on the model. Right? It's like this is the shuttle bay of the Enterprise. It's there. Like it was in the model. Like did they just say, fuck it. No one's gonna be watching this show. No one's gonna be putting a costume on in like 50 years and wearing the freaking costume ever again. Like 80 years, whatever the hell it is. But
I'm pretty sure the shuttle bay actually says shuttle bay on it too.
It probably
on the
does.
model.
It probably does.
But here's
insert shuttle here.
Here's a fun fact I read about that particular B plot, and maybe that's why they didn't want to solve it that way. That was actually pretty late into the scripting process. It was originally meant to be just Kirk being split,
right?
And they just kind of added that on to increase the tension.
Okay, that's cool.
But
I didn't know that. That's very cool.
But yeah, I think the first time we see the shuttle bay, or not the shuttle bay, but the shuttlecraft is in the menagerie when they're chasing them down. I think that's the first reference to it.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that makes the most sense. I think you're right.
Yeah, but and the dog though.
The dog.
The fucking dog.
It couldn't have looked any better back then. Like it's just a dog.
Like a lot of people dress up their dog now on TikTok and Instagram and stuff, and this is that. This is like someone go to the pet store and buy a Halloween unicorn costume or something for a dog.
Yeah, it was like go buy a oh gosh, I'm clicking the wrong button. It was like go buy a dinosaur costume, put it on the dog, and then we're not gonna feed it and piss it off really bad.
Yeah, well, or I'm assuming there were 2 dogs.
Oh.
There had to be 2 dogs, right?
I think it was just the one.
No, it was
because,
just one. They never hold them together in the same shot.
Wasn't there one scene? Well, there's one must have been just like a stuffed bit of fur or something. Because the one's passed out when they do the transporter thing. So there must have been like a prop double.
Yeah, there had to have been a prop dog because they're definitely.
Or they drugged it because they're probably allowed to do that in the 60s.
Yeah, like you can tell that there's there's really one dog there.
No space dogs were harmed in the the production of this episode.
I desperately tried to look for any information regarding that dog. I'm pretty sure it was just a crew dog or something like
Somebody
that.
said,
Like,
"Who's got a dog
Yes.
that's a cute little thing?"
who has any dog
Yeah,
that we
like-
can just...
Or they just went outside and found one. Like
Let's just
hanging
pop
out
a Halloween
There's
costume
a dog,
on it and
There's
call
a
it
dog
a day.
floating around. It's the poor dog doesn't even get an IMDb out of this. It's like it's a shame. Like this dog's famous and it's
Yeah.
got no recognition.
No lines, no...
No nothing.
I can only imagine like there had to have been some people on the crew that were just like, Jesus Christ, it's a fucking dog. Like, like there had to have been a couple people at least.
Like,
But I will say the dog's terrible. But at the same time, there's a lot of like I like the fact that like we're several episodes in and we've already had 2 transporter problems. Maybe we should like stop with the transporter and figure out why this thing in 2 of the 5 episodes so far we've had a transporter problem.
yeah, like... So...
Who designed this piece of shit?
I guess the thing is,
Some
like,
beta testing.
they get the... This particular transporter issue is caused by that, like, yellow dust that's on the ground.
Yeah, I forgot about. Yeah, that's right. I have that in my notes.
Yeah,
That's
it's,
true.
Um,
It's a metallic ore
yes,
with
the
unusual properties. I think is what they say.
metallic ore with unusual properties
See,
that,
I've watched the show.
like, it didn't look that metallic, but you know, it is what it is, you know. So we get Kirk showing up, right? Like, right, so the dog gets beamed up, and then Kirk beams up, or is it the other way around? Kirk.
The dog comes later. Kirk gets beamed up and he kind of gets dizzy on the transporter. And Scotty's like, "Yo, you're all right?" And he's like, oh, I can't get out that way. So he's like, "So Scotty, I'm gonna take you up. Come on, I'm gonna walk you to sick bay." And he's like, "Don't leave the transporter unattended." He goes, "I'll be back in a minute." Which is good that, like, I like the fact that they actually, we shouldn't leave this, like, really important piece of equipment without somebody staffed here.
Yeah.
Like, I like the fact that there should be always somebody staffed in the transporter room just to make sure nobody's freaking around with it.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, as we'll find
And then when, soon as they leave, they pan back over, and then, weirdly shadowed Captain Kirk appears on the Enterprise.
Yeah, that's when, that's what I had, mood lighting.
Like, I love the music in this episode. I love the early Star Trek music so much. I love the music in this episode.
Yeah, it's very good music, Sting. Like, he just spins around, he's like,
And the directing, like, I mean, it's shot really well. Like, this episode is shot really well. I think I have a better appreciation for filmmaking, the filmmaking quality of these shows. Like, you think about them and in your mind you kind of, but then you go, when you're rewatching them from a different standpoint, you realize most of the time these episodes are shot really well. Like, especially in the early season where they really focused on a lot of cool lighting and shadows and stuff. And I do like the film composition in these early episodes.
Yeah, I think they used it was good use of close-ups and everything like that. It was just, you get the close-ups to, like, demonstrate the difference between the 2 Kirks in this particular episode. I think they had eyeliner on Bad Kirk too, just to kind of darken his eyes a little bit.
I've noticed that he's got a little bit of,
but
space mascara.
Another filmmaking thing that I really liked about this episode is, like, so Kirk, I would say the real Kirk, but they're both the real Kirk.
They're both
like,
the real Kirk, right?
That's something that, like, isn't explicitly stated in the well, it is kind of, but, like, they refer to the bad Kirk as an imposter, but he actually isn't, as we find out later. He's just another half of Kirk. But when good Kirk goes, he goes off duty, which is important because that sets up the way we can tell them apart. Because, well, one of the ways we can easily tell them apart.
Right.
He has the like, he goes off duty and he just puts on his tunic, right?
He puts on the other uniform option, the green one. And I think this is the first time we see the green one. And I think it's a smart device in costuming because then you can have this thing where he's switching, the imposter is switching shirts and trying to make sure, like, like that he can blend in. And obviously Kirk goes to his quarters because he's exhausted because of the experience of, physically his body's gone through a trauma, so to speak. So his body is both their bodies are very weakened by this process being duplicated, so to speak. And I that makes sense, and it does create. It's a well-written. I think it's a well-written plot device that he goes and lays down, and all of a sudden this guy's wandering around,
Yeah, we actually get foreshadowing to that unhealthiness, like deeper in. Well, before they say that the dog is getting unhealthy.
Right.
We get foreshadowing into like how much damage the split actually did, because Spock is like, we tried to beam down thermal units, but the duplication made them not operate.
Yeah, like they tried to it's funny because early on they don't realize there's two Kirks. It's such a good episode because it really does explore like how people are unchecked, and without whatever that keeps them in check. And I like that. I like that concept of, and obviously they go very sexual very early in this episode, and it's very well done. I mean, I think that the scene where he tries to rape Yeoman Rand is just like intense. Like it's disturbing.
Yeah,
and then he beats the crap out of the one guy. He jumps him and just beats him, and and Kirk just Spock's kind of like confused because the first thing is the brandy,
Saurian Brandy.
The Saurian Brandy, and he goes, "Give me the brandy!" And he, and then there's that great shot, and he's just walking through the ship drinking. Like, imagine if you're just like crewman Bob, and you're on the Enterprise, and here comes the captain walking by, just like chugging Saurian Brandy, like smiling, wiping his face on his sleeve. I'm like, holy shit, man, Captain's having a bad day.
That was quite the away team down there, man.
Yeah, that was a party.
Away mission.
I got to get on more away missions. And then obviously he decides, then he sees the sign, and he's decided he's going to have like a little, get a little something. And then when, I love that where where Kirk doesn't understand, because Kirk's in his quarters and Spock comes and seems like, "Are you all right? Like, what's going on?" And he's like, "I think the doctor's been messing with you." He's like, I'm thoroughly annoyed. Like, and then we realize what's going on because of the second dog, and then, we may have because then they realize, then Yeoman Rand says, he tried to jump me, and then the other guy's like, "It wasn't me," and the other goes, "It was you, sir." And it's like, and Kirk has that kind of weird, you almost sense like already that it's that in the script that he's like, imposter, like, oh no, like is that sensitive version of him is like, we start to see it early on. It doesn't just suddenly show up. Like, immediately we start to see like the change in Kirk's character. Being split into two halves, so to speak.
Yeah, you mentioned the scene with, in Yeoman Rand's quarters. That was shot very well. Like, they deliberately, basically put us there.
Yes.
And behind Yeoman Rand. Like, we are Yeoman Rand in that scenario.
The music's good. It's shot quick. It's kind of jump cuts a little bit, too. And if when I rewatched it, I noticed that I don't know if it's scripted, but Shatner says just a minute, he's really aggressive in what he's saying, and I'm like, I don't know if that was scripted. Obviously it's not one of the things you'll know, or if just really good acting. She's tremendous in it too. She plays it really good, and you see other stuff from this period, and it comes across like where this one came across like, wow, if that was today, they would have shot it a little bit differently music wise, I'm sure. But I was watching Law and Order, I feel like him just literally physically attacking her and trying to subdue her physically it's well done and disturbing.
Yeah, speaking of Yeoman Rand's acting, or I forget her name.
Grace Whitney.
Yeah, Grace Whitney's acting. I read that during because she has another fantastic performance when she's in medbay, because Kirk walks up and he's like, "Hey, I look at me. I'm not. You didn't scratch my face. It couldn't have been me." But she's giving this really heartfelt performance, and the thing is, speaking of things that you just wouldn't do today, Shatner slapped her.
Right.
Like Shatner, to get that performance out of her without really prompting from the from Roddenberry or the director or really anybody. He might have asked her, I don't know, like it didn't specify that, but he just slapped her. That's why she's like she's physically shaking at the time.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Well, that's a method acting. I mean,
yeah.
I didn't know that. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. But it was
yeah, I mean, I love this episode because I do feel like that this is one of those episodes where I think they work backwards, and they definitely said, let's examine the human nature and let's write it in the script, because Spock's is like, who better to examine? What a great opportunity we have here to see a starship captain, one of the like someone incredibly strong, not just some average Joe, and what it would be like if we separated him into his basically good and evil half, so to speak, and we realize, wow, that like your dark side actually really helps you command, and McCoy just gets mad at him, like, you've got your intellect, and like, this is the captain's got your analyzing there, and he's like, yes, and it's back and forth, and I do love, this is again, and I mentioned in the last episode, I love the Kirk, Spock, McCoy dynamic. I love these scenes. I love when Spock and McCoy kind of argue it out, and Kirk's just kind of sitting there like, what, here they go again, and this is another early great one, It's just neat. I just think it's great that we're getting this. It's not just some goofy sci-fi thing. They're trying to like tell, they're trying to make a point about humanity.
Yeah, like the fact that like obviously Kirk's bad side is depicted as a bad person, but like he's depicted as a necessary part of Kirk, right? Like it's the intrusive thoughts tempered by wisdom and
Right.
logic, basically.
Right.
Like his, in the case of Yeoman Rand, his lust would normally just be tempered by, his reasoning, right? And it really kind of like, it's also just a look at humanity in general, because you're just like, Roddenberry is saying we're all capable of this,
Yeah,
right? Like
definitely.
Like,
And that's why I think shows like this, still live with us, because there is something to them. Other shows not so much, but this show is, not this episode specifically, but the show in general and what it tries to do, the moral play, and I've said it 1,000 times, and I'm sure I'll say it 1,000 times more. The moral play of Star Trek is just great, and I even like that Spock compares it to his own experience. He's like, dividing into two halves is no whatever for me, Doctor. Like, I have the Vulcan side, I have my human side, and I like that there's a lot of cool stuff in here. Like Kirk realizes that Spock's kind of right, that he's losing his ability to command, and he says, Mr. Spock, like, if you see me faltering again, your orders are to tell me. Like, he doesn't just say, help me, Spock. He's like, your orders are to tell me. Because then even, like, set the phasers on stun, and then, like, Spock wants him to, like, go call more security when they realize they've got the imposter cornered. Because where would you go to hide? He goes, I go down to the engineering desk, because obviously they have the same thought process. So they go down there. He's like, shouldn't we get more help? He's like, if I'm to be the captain, I must act like it. So, like, even because Spock is trying to get him, like, he's trying to help, told me to help you, and he's like, well, no, I need to do this myself, and that's where they introduce the Vulcan neck pinch, and it's shot really well in this one.
Yeah, Spock. The interactions between Kirk and Spock, like, really kind of like it makes the ship crew seem very, like, almost like Age of Sail-ish. Like, it's
Right.
like, if
Picard would have a kumbaya
Yeah.
and tell everybody, oh, we're all friends here. Like, don't worry about command structure. Where I think this ship out in the middle of nowhere, so to speak, most of the time, they, and that's the military aspect, which John Roddenberry knows, and you've mentioned before with like Nimoy's background, that the captain has to be the captain.
Yes.
And that's a theme, obviously, throughout the show, is that there's got to be a structure, and he never really tells the crew exactly what happens. So people that were directly involved know, but obviously he never makes an announcement. Oh, by the way, the transporter sucks. Don't go in the transporter because you'll probably get duplicated.
Yeah, it was very interesting just to see how Spock basically just implied that if Kirk showed any weakness, he would get rid of him. Well, not kill him, but
they lose faith in you.
Yeah.
And then you lose command,
Yeah.
and that's because Kirk wants to just tell everybody, oh, they're good crew, they deserve to know. And he's like, no, they don't. You can't do that, sir. You just can't. It's cool. Like it's smart. I like McCoy has a cool moment there. He's like, you see, he was afraid and you weren't. Like so, there is that aspect of. Humanity also like that, like you can use your intellect and you can temperament. And I don't know, I think it's really good. Even the scene where when they got to go back to the transporter and they're both really like in bad shape at this point. They're both slowly dying. And
we should bring up the
go ahead.
Transporting the dog for.
Yep.
So they figure out how to put them back together, right?
Even though the transport, it's funny, the funny thing about the transporter are already broken, and then it really gets broken because the phaser fires a hole in the thing. And it's funny, on Next Generation, they just be like, just replicate some new parts. Because they don't have that.
Yeah.
They have a food replicator, and that's about it on this ship. They don't if they don't have it in a warehouse on the ship, they don't have it. Like they can't make it in and I love that about this era of sci-fi that they're kind of on their own. Like if something breaks, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah. Or they have to find a nearby planet, which we'll
they have
discuss
to jury,
in the next episode.
They have to jury rig like something, to make it work. And obviously the Scotty Ingenuity thing is kind of cool. Meanwhile, you got the guys dying on the planet, and I like the concept of using the phaser to heat rocks.
Yeah.
I always loved that. I was like, I think that's a cool little thing that they came up with.
Yeah, we'll see that come back a couple times as we go through the series. So they go to transport the dog, right? I call it a dog. It's just going to be a dog. Creature, whatever they want to call
Space
it.
doggy,
It's a freaking dog.
Yeah.
The doggy unicorn from outer space.
So they transport it, and it comes back dead. And this is where Spock relates to himself. He's like, as you mentioned earlier, he's like, I can relate to this. I have two halves. He really kind of implies that he's in a lot of inner conflict that he just keeps tamped down, right?
Right.
With his own, will, essentially, which is interesting. But he's like, no, McCoy, ignore your medical degrees for a moment. This is because of the conflict of putting these two halves of the creature together. It's just a dumb creature. It doesn't understand what's happening to it.
Right.
It got terrified to death. And McCoy's like, that sounds stupid, Spock. What are you talking about?
It's a good scene. It is a good scene, and again, I love that this interactive science-y versus common sense type stuff that they do. It's neat. No, it's good. Then they decide that it's just the guys are gonna die, and I think that plot device that. If they had time, they could have tested it and done stuff like that. And Kirk just decides, nope, we just got to get these guys up before it's too late. His compassion for his crew. For some reason in my mind, like I've always remembered that concept of getting a long rope and lowering a pot of coffee. For whatever reason in my mind, I've always since I was so little when I was exposed to this episode, I was probably watching the syndication. I was like 4 or 5 years old, and I always remember that that phrase Sulu wrapped up in that. I always so couldn't you just beam down more blankets? Like, like...
Yeah, they would have gotten duplicated.
Or maybe like a box.
they
How
would've
about a box? How
they
about, do you got a container
Yeah.
that you could just mail, that you could email? That you, Jesus Christ.
Could you imagine they
Send
like
an email.
beam down some blankets and
They-
they get duplicated?
Good.
And you've got
Like more
you've
blankets.
you got blankets that keep them warm, and then blankets that purposely keep them cold.
Yeah, like the concept of a blanket that,
An evil
that
blanket.
doesn't know what it's supposed to do, the evil blanket. It's like those blankets my wife buys that are... that suck the moisture out of your body. I don't know what that material is that she buys. And you wake up and you're dehydrated. Like, what is this blanket you bought? Why do I need to hydrate 3 times a night with this stupid blanket? But why didn't they just, like, I mean, I'm picking on an episode that I love because you just kind of have
you
to.
gotta.
But I mean, like, don't you guys got a big box that they could have just beamed down, that they could have just hid in the box to stay out of the cold? Like, it would have been better than being in just like wearing the tent, because they basically just had like a parachute wrapped around him is what it looked like.
Yeah, it looked like one of those like thermal blankets.
Yeah, like
I-
it was nylon. It looked like a nylon like parachute, like you guys used to play with in gym class, where you'd play the game where you'd have the ball on it and you'd throw it up. I don't know if you guys did that in gym class.
You beamed down a quilted, knitted blanket, and it turned into a crocheted blanket.
Turns back into yarn. It's just like they gotta knit themselves. It's just got. I mean, we already mentioned like where's the shuttlecraft? Like there's but obviously they needed a plot device to speed it up, and they did it at the last minute, so probably it wasn't vetted out as well as they should have.
Yeah, I mean it added tension. It was the time that they needed. I think the original intent was to make it more like a cerebral thing, maybe, where it's like, well, is this the right thing to do? Put the evil back into Kirk, essentially.
Right. And even like his thing is, well, let's just leave him. We can't save him. Like, what? What do we do? And he's like, and I do like, we got to get back to that point where he's putting the makeup on. And I don't know why he has makeup, but he's putting makeup on. And he's like, I'm Captain Kirk. I'm Captain Kirk. Like, and he's like, he's kind of like, because he is Captain Kirk and he doesn't understand. I don't think that side of him really, until maybe he's in sickbay, really truly understands what's happening to him initially too, because he's been isolated and he's not interacting with anybody, so he doesn't really know. Does that half ever realize? My impression is, as I rewatched this episode, he didn't really realize that until he hears he's in his quarters and he hears this other Captain Kirk on the intercom. He's like, I'm Captain. He breaks I like that when he breaks the monitor, that it actually sparked. Yeah. I like the fact that someone in the prop department actually said, well, wouldn't it like have an electrical spark or something if we did this? Like they did. But again, but he's like, so then he's like, I've got to prove to them that I'm Captain. That's when he goes and finds makeup. I don't know why he has makeup cover up, but that to me is interesting, because until that moment, I don't think he realizes. When does he really truly realize? Probably after he gets, till maybe when they're in engineering.
I assume that I think when he realized that they are the same person, just not together.
Right.
I think that was probably when he was lying in sickbay. Because I don't think anybody told him what the exact
Well, in the engineering scene, they have that moment where he's got the phaser and good Captain Kirk is saying we need each other. We're part of each other. Like, I don't need you, and he's going to shoot him, and then Spock knocks him out, which is a tremendously important thing.
Yeah, he'd set the phaser to kill.
Yeah.
Too.
But I mean, just the invention of the Vulcan neck pinch cannot be understated. Like, it really is such a cool. I mean, it wasn't, and it's not a written thing, right? The actor said, "I don't think I should punch him. Can we come up with something else?" And they've talked about it. They've all talked about it. It wasn't one guy. I think it was a conversation. And originally, like, Nimoy's theory was that he had like a little energy that came out of his fingers or whatever. But then they've made it into it's more it's like a pressure point, and you just knock somebody out. That's why it doesn't work on certain races, because they don't necessarily have that pressure point.
Yeah, I think Data utilizes it at least once.
Right. Yeah, Data utilizes it in the episode where Leonard Nimoy plays Ambassador Spock. Yeah. They use that in there, and he's like, ooh, because they obviously wanted that cool. I can't wait till we get to that episode. That'll be many years from now.
Yeah, but, I like that the imposter Kirk, the bad Kirk, like, he has Kirk's fear too. like that's something that's like kind of glossed over. Like the compassionate, like indecisive Kirk is literally fearless. Like he is not afraid of anything. Like that's kind of like where
He should have been afraid that he was going to get shot.
yeah, he was just standing there. He's just like, nah, I'm not afraid of you shooting me. Yeah, and like he would have shot him. Like and like he
And you raised a really good point that like, and and that's why I like doing this show with you so much, because you bring a different perspective that I never thought of, and I've watched this episode 1,000 times. You said it. You were like, you just said it. You're like, that Captain Kirk is afraid of losing command too.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought of it from that perspective. Yeah. Like, it's smart. That's a really, like, really cool observation. That's just great. I never thought of that. I mean, like, yeah, they're both afraid of losing command because the ship's everything to them, and that's why that scene on the bridge is when they finally do the.
I already have one wife. It's the Enterprise.
I think that's
what's the line?
The next episode.
That's the next.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, that's during Mud's Women.
God damn it! I thought we were there.
I can't wait.
But I have like naval stuff to talk about in that episode. But
cool.
Like the fact like that Kirk was so afraid of dying. Like that's why he was like didn't want to recombine with the Prime Kirk, because presumably he knew about the dog, which died, and he was just scared.
I don't want to go back.
Yeah. Like,
please don't make me like. I love the fact that they really go heavy on the fact that dark side of you has a lot of the dark side is also where insecurity comes from. So they really play up a lot of how would these two. It's kind of like left brain, right brain stuff. Like what part of your brain moves to what's here, what's there. Like your intellect versus your anxiety. You know, like mental illness. Like when you're depressed. Like you can't conceive that other people have the same fears and stuff that you, even though everybody tells you that, but you just can't process it. And I think that's a big part of like that's why this episode's cool, because it's not just goofy sci-fi. It's like there's a bigger point to what the story that they're trying to tell with this, was why again the show holds up.
Yes. So like. Yeah, I just wish they'd given us more time with Spock and Bad Kirk, because like Spock's starting to figure it out, and then just normal Kirk or compassionate Kirk shows up, and I was a little bit disappointed by that, because like Spock obviously immediately recognized that this was not the same Kirk that he had been dealing with, because he just shows up, and first of all he was just way more decisive, like just. Yeah,
we're leaving
do this, do that.
Yeah, we're leaving him. Let's go.
And I wish we could have gotten that from Spock instead of just Kirk showing up. But
it's cool, because then there's a great line there. Let the captain handle this.
Oh yeah, he's just like
it's just like, because he's like you, and it's a wink and a nod, like nudge nudge, Bob your uncle, like good captain. You have to. This is so important that you do this, not just for now, but for your own, like when you're back together, when this all works out, that you're able to do this, that you have to win this fight, this whatever interaction. You've got to do this. You've got to be in command. Like that's the big thing that Spock gets out of. And again, it goes back to what you said about Spock's inner conflict, that he's telling him, from my experience, you've got to win this interaction.
Yeah, I think Spock, more than any other character, recognized that was Kirk too. Like, and like that's why when the I believe it was the helmsman, I think, the one before Chekhov, he was always like, Spock, what do we do? Which one?
Do? Yeah.
No, just let Kirk handle this.
Let the captain handle this. And it's because again, really nobody knows except Spock, McCoy, Yeoman Rand, and Kirk. Like nobody else knows that this McCoy, none of them besides like the three of them and Rand, because she was raped or essentially almost raped. They're the only ones that know what happened. So they're protecting Kirk's command and everything. And I just think, and I love when Kirk just kind of like the Shatner just kind of grabs the phaser and he just kind of throws it, and like he's literally, they're both exhausted.
Yeah.
This is this process. They're and then they bring him to sick bay, and then to the transporter, and then like he has that moment, and
you get Kirk's stunt double.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, he just doesn't look
He
very
doesn't
much.
body. Yeah, they do a better job at that now. There is a really cool moment there where Kirk says to Spock, "If this doesn't work,"
Yeah, and then
and he's
Spock's-
thanking him like, "Thanks for everything." Like, and that's again the humanity of that friendship to me is just great. You know, like, and I think that here we are. We're only 5 episodes in, and we already have this incredible friendship established.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
probably one of the best in television history, in my opinion.
Yeah, at the end of the episode there, we get a little bit of a, of the times moment though. Like
Yeah, that's
Yeoman Rand goes back up to Spock and he's like, Kirk's real interesting. Eh?
Yeah,
it's like
that
it's
dark side
like-
had some interesting qualities, don't you think? It was kind of like, whoa, man, Spock. Like,
yeah, let's give it some time
Human
here,
Resources is giving you a call after that one. You're gonna get us a letter in your thing. Good episode. I like this episode a lot. You know, Sulu doesn't die. That's good.
He's pretty bad off though.
Yeah.
Like, severe frostbite.
Severe frostbite. But okay,
yeah.
a good one.
Yeah.
One of my favorite episodes. I mean, I have a lot of favorite episodes, but I love this episode a lot because I feel like I love the early stuff because I feel like the canon of everything is being created really well. And I think that's why the show holds up because, again, the early episodes are so good.
Yep. And then, wait, was it this episode or the next episode where we get... Where's... I suppose
That's
for you
the
to...
next, it's the next episode. It's the
We'll
next
get to it
episode.
then.
Oh, I just wanted to mention one thing that I noticed, and I don't know. I don't think it was on purpose. I just think it was just they made a mistake and then had no choice. But if you watch the final confrontation between Kirk and Kirk at the very, very end before they bring him back, the shot of bad Kirk is a reverse shot.
Yeah.
It's and it's only that shot in the entire episode is like
Something
that.
got screwed up there.
Yeah, either I think they shot it one way
Mhm.
and they thought it was going to be like right, and then they put it in the editing like board and they were like, oh shit, and they had to flip
And
it
they
because
just flipped
you
it.
can literally tell the insignia is on the wrong side, his hair's going the wrong way.
Right.
But it looks like they're looking because the 180 rule, you can't cross that line,
Right.
and they look like they're looking at each other, but it's actually just a completely flipped shot.
I know that like they literally. I know from reading some stuff about the show that when they designed the set with the rule of 180s in mind. That the bridge needed to look pretty much the same all the way around, so that they could take out the fourth wall, so to speak, where the view screen is, and then they could shoot things by just framing somebody without having to bring all the set back together. So like that's why like there's those panels that are almost over to the view screen are exactly the same panels, but sometimes they would just utilize other set pieces just to save time and money.
Yeah, so we'll probably end up seeing that kind of thing again, to be honest, where they're both facing the same direction.
There's
Yeah,
definitely some moments like that. There's definitely ones going up to shore leave. There's even a shot in this next episode, which I really believe there's a shot of McCoy that they reused from something else. I don't even think it's in the same room. I think it's literally like from the transporter scene. They used it in a later scene because they forgot to shoot a scene, or they lost it, or the film got developed poorly, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I
Those
think
are
it's
practical things that happened when they were shooting on film.
Yeah, it's just like, and I don't think anybody who was watching it then noticed, but, watching it now, you're like, because something was off. I was like, something's really weird
Well, something
here.
is
and then you kind of notice.
that, like, there's an episode in the Mirror Universe, which we'll get to, where the Enterprise flies in a different way. Like, instead of the Enterprise going left to right, because all ships in the good guys always went left to right, the bad guys always went right to left. That was just kind of a convention in Hollywood of the time.
Because
So-
it's uncomfortable.
Right. So when they do the Mirror episode, the Mirror Enterprise goes right to left. They just flip the footage because they couldn't film the other side of the model because the other side of the model was never finished. Because they didn't need to finish the left side of the model because we were never going to see it. Most of the left side of the model was never painted in detail. It was only
Have
the
you,
right side. The front, back, and right side, but not the left side.
Well, fun fact, have you ever been to Washington, D.C.?
Like,
Have you seen the model?
yeah, now it's been now they
I mean, it's completely finished now, but I went there a couple years ago and I had never seen it because normally, so they swap between that and the Millennium Falcon. They have both of them.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize.
And they normally swap them out every couple of months. And when I was there, they had the Enterprise out, and I was awestruck. First off, I did not know it was that big. I mean, it is probably the length of this room.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah.
It's massive, and it was just beautifully done. And I didn't think that the model was that big. The Millennium Falcon is not that big.
No.
The Falcon is probably like half the size of this table.
Most of the models back then they didn't have that fine motor skills construction that they could do. By the time you get to Star Wars, like the plastics were, harder to use. So models in this time period tended to be bigger. Although some of the other Enterprise versions of the Constitution class that we see, some of them are literally store-bought models. Some of them were smaller, just for different things.
Yeah.
Although a consideration back then, especially, was like the bigger the model is, the smaller the strings that hold it up look.
Right.
Like so.
Oh, good point.
That's true. Well, also you noticed a lot of the Star Wars ships, for example, don't have lights on the outside.
Mm.
Right.
This ship is like fully lit from the inside. Like the lights that you see in all the bays and on the phasers and all that sort of stuff, they're all real practical lights that are actually on the model, and you can see them today.
Right.
Yeah,
So it's really cool. Anyway, I just had to throw that in before we get into the next episode because I thought it was cool.
Is it still in the gift shop at the Smithsonian? Is that where it's
No, it is.
somewhere else?
No,
for years it was in the gift shop in the Smithsonian.
When I went,
Air and Space Museum, if you go to Washington.
well, when I went, Air and Space Museum, that's where I was. And when you walk in, it's so you basically you walk in the front door, and there's obviously the giant rocket right in front of you. It's slightly off to the left towards like where the food court is, where like the McDonald's and stuff is. That's where it was at the time, but they change stuff around all the time.
Of course,
but when I went there, that's where it was, and it was the only thing that was on display in that section of the room. It was really, really cool, and they had like all the pictures and stuff, and I believe they may have even had that picture of William Shatner. So it was really neat. But anyway, I just had to say that because I got to see it for real, and it was awesome.
No, it's one of those things. It's meeting your heroes.
So
Let's
now
move
we're
on.
going to Mud's Women.
I'm just going to preface this. I hate this episode.
Really?
I hate this episode so much.
Yeah, it's
We got space. He's a pirate. He's like a pimp daddy. He's we got like horse in space.
Yeah.
It's bad. I said to him before you got here, like well, go ahead, introduce the episode, and then I'll rant.
Right.
I'm not gonna rant too much. I just don't like this episode.
I'm with you.
I like the technical details from this episode.
I will agree that the introduction of dilithium crystal, but I don't want to jump the gun here. Get to the description
all right,
of it.
so
Because I don't even, obviously I don't have the videotape for this, because this is not one I needed in my collection at any point in my life.
yeah, he didn't keep the collection for that. So I'll just come up with a synopsis. So the crew of the Enterprise stumbles upon a strange ship flying through space. Upon interdicting said ship, they discover Mud, a space pimp.
Hardcore Fenton Mud.
Yes, Arcor Fenton Mud, or whatever Lawson or whatever the heck his fake name was. It's revealed through the episode that Mud gives the women who are with him drugs to make them more attractive, but as we come to find out, the drugs are actually not drugs, or they are drugs. I don't know what they are.
They're a little bit of both.
They're like Adderall for contraband.
They're Adderall Mises steroids. I don't know what they are. Like, that's awful. That's great though.
That's such a good description.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, is it a hallucinogen? Because it makes everybody else get hot too, right?
Oh my God, that's so fucking true.
I mean, that's kind of how they end up describing it. It's like it just makes you more confident, like, and that's the entirety of what they do.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
But all right, so
This episode, in terms of the sexualization of stuff, doesn't air well, especially the description of what the drug does at the end, the Venus drug. So the theory is that Mud has acquired this thing called the Venus drug, which has been outlawed. So, but it's weird because obviously it has like, I don't know what this episode is. The guy who wrote it, I Googled it this morning, only wrote 2 episodes, this episode and the other Mud episode that comes up, Mud's Women, or I Mud, that comes up later. That's the only 2 episodes of the show he ever wrote. I like the other episode because it's a silly, fun episode. There is a lot of fun, silly stuff in this episode. I like the actor's portrayal of Mud. I like the fact that they brought Mud back on Discovery. at some point.
Which he was played by Rainn Wilson.
Yeah.
For those who don't know, is Dwight from The Office.
Yeah, and Rainn Wilson does a great job playing that character, kind of updating it.
Mud actually shows up in more than that. He's well, not Mud himself, but his shop is a thing in the video game Star Trek Online. It's Mud's shop or whatever, Mud's Market, and you just buy a bunch of cosmetic materials from him,
and women.
And women, yeah.
Women that you can resell to. So I read something this morning about this episode, that this was one of the episodes that was considered for the pilot.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what?
Well, I keep saying this. Every episode of this show, the conflict is stuck. The conflict, like every single episode of this show.
Yeah.
There's more booty shots in this show than like Wonder Woman. And
well, every single episode of this show, and it's because it's the 60s and it's written by all dudes. Every conflict of every episode of this show is about sexualizing women.
Yes.
Like literally, the entire show is about that.
Yes. Especially in this first season.
Well,
it's not as bad later on, but this first season's really bad that way. And like, like it's there's a lot of cool scenes like that, like where Kirk even says like, are they really that beautiful? Are we just tired?
Yeah.
Like he senses there's something off.
Yeah, McCoy's just like, what? This is weird. What? This isn't right.
Like, and it makes my machine
See,
go
but
ping.
and I'm also I'm sitting there and I'm like, it is about the women, but there really is like a moral point to it too, saying that like all of these people are stuck in space for 5 years.
There are women on the ship. We see a bunch of women wandering around the corridors. There's even another couple wandering down the hallway at one point. Like there's a scene, I watched it. There's several other hallway shots and there's random other extras. The hallways are rarely absent in the first season. Like you get to the third season, they cut the budget, so they probably didn't have money for extras. But like, there's a lot. Usually, you see people wandering the halls a lot in this show.
Oh yeah,
and there's other women on the ship clearly. Like because Uhura's even. So I read a lot of cool stuff about this episode. That there was a scene where Mud tries to get Uhura to take the drug.
Mm.
And then there's a big thing about making yourself whatever, and she says, no, I don't need it, kind of thing. And that scene got cut, and a lot of people to this day are mad that scene wasn't shot.
Yeah.
Because that would have been a cool scene.
That would have been a cool scene, too, but also Nichelle Nichols is gorgeous.
Yes.
So it's really interesting that, like, if they tried to say, oh, yeah, you have to take this drug, it would have been really nice to see her be, like, super confident. Because I don't need it.
Well, Uhura as a character is already pretty confident for a 60s woman.
Yeah.
Like,
And
extremely
weird
and they're
dynamic
accenting
of
that,
this.
too, in Strange New Worlds.
Right. And the dynamic of that, we've got the sexualization of women. We also have strong women on the show at different times. Like, you kind
of have to take a lot of historical perspective with
I'm not,
the show.
yeah.
It's like you got to consider 2 years prior to this show being aired was the end of the Jim Crow era. Like this,
That's true, yeah.
We're like, when Gene Roddenberry was writing this show, LBJ was passing the Civil Rights Act.
And that's clearly, a theme that, rights are addressed in this, like, right to meet your accuser. Like, that's something that gets covered a lot. Like, the show is very period, and a lot of those episodes still hold up because there is a moral play that I still think holds up. This episode was, also, one of the reasons why it wasn't used as the pilot or even the second pilot was because they were worried about that he's selling women, what he just sells women, it's the producers looked at it and said, the studio executives no, you can do this episode, and it's a Roddenberry had the concept, and then it was turned over to the writer, and I forget the writer's name. And the writer did a lot of stuff. He wrote for $6 Million Man. The writer had a hell of a nice long career. I looked at his writing credits. The guy wrote for everything. But clearly it was the synopsis that Gene Roddenberry came up with is guy has women kind of, and in the synopsis that he described it to a Western plot. It reminds me of something you would have seen on the the lawman show, like one of those where a guy shows up in a town, he's got these women that he's trying to sell to miners, like they might as well have been gold miners and like have little pins, tins and shit. But the most important thing in this episode is they introduce the concept of how the ship keeps going. It's not just a traditional fuel; it's dilithium crystals. Although it is called lithium crystals. Lithium dye gets added later, but it's the introduction of lithium crystals.
Yeah. I like how it kind of sheds light on how the Federation kind of works. I think it's still not the Federation, but like apparently like there's just people who charter ships and colonize worlds, just them and their family, and it's like I guess people like mud would be necessary in a society where you just can't walk to the nearest town.
It is the Old West. Like the Star Trek universe in this time frame is the Old West. That's why they purposely set the Next Generation 100 years after, because they wanted to look at California in 1846 versus 1946, or 100 years, like California today versus California when they were in the 49, when they were panning for gold. Like there was a military around, but it was, like every planet was like a town that you would visit, and that's why the show is called Stagecoach to the Stars, or whatever they refer to it as, because like a wagon train to the stars, because that was the show on the TV at the time about a wagon train that was going to California and all the things that happened to them every week as they were going to California. But like I feel like that was the thing. Like there probably is this. There's a federation of planets, but it's not like so. I don't think we really see the term federation until season 2.
Yeah, probably not.
When that first episode of Amok Time, where we meet Spock. No, I'm sorry. The episode where we meet Spock's parents is the first time I think we actually hear about the Federation. But at this point, they're just kind of flight. Like they're kind of exploring, but they also have to help out once in a while, and they have to follow that. And then they've got rules. They have to arrest Mud, so to speak.
Well, yeah, that's actually something for an unrelated reason entirely. I was researching naval maritime law.
Right.
The reason why they interdicted him is because it's actually in our world, it's illegal to be on the open seas without a flag. Like you have to have a flag designating you to a country of origin, or you'll be interdicted by any warship that comes across you.
I didn't get that. Didn't know that.
So that's why they essentially pull him over, because.
And then he goes into an asteroid belt.
Yeah.
Well,
not like the Millennium Falcon going in an asteroid belt.
But I honestly I like that. I mean, now that you've just said, I've never thought of that before, but now that you just said that, you see that all the time. I mean, in Star Wars, Star Trek, constantly anything that has to do with space, it's always please identify yourself.
Right.
Please identify yourself. State your base of origin. Like they say that all the time, and that makes so much sense because they'd have to arrest them.
Right.
I never thought of that.
Damn. Yeah, go to I guess when we were in Newport this summer, I guess every boat had a flag on it of the country that they were registered through. And my wife was noticing a lot of them were a lot of the yachts that were there were flags. We ended up Googling some of the flags where they were, and most of them were Caribbean. So the boats are registered. There's probably some tax incentive or something that if you register your boat through Barbados as opposed to the United States, that it's probably easier to register it or something. I don't know.
There's actually I guess regardless of where you are, well, unless you're in a country's waters,
right? If
you're in international waters and you're flying a country's flag, you're beholden to their laws.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I saw that once on NCIS when they arrested a bad guy. And he said, "You can't arrest us." And he's like, "We aren't arresting you. It's the country of the flag that you're flying." And they use it as a great plot device. And again, I don't know much about the Navy, but you said you had some cool stuff. That's really cool. That's great.
Yeah. Also, Uhura was in gold in this. Well, we see her one time, at the beginning of the episode. She was wearing gold.
That's right, she was.
There's a couple scenes where she's just in the background kind of wandering around when the ship's kind of running out of energy. And she's in gold again in another episode, too, but I forget which one.
I think it was earlier than this.
Yeah.
Well, she was in gold in the very first episode. Well, one of the pilots.
Yeah.
But that it didn't even matter back then. Right. We also kind of get a a look at transporters in this episode, another look at them anyway. They use up a ton of power at least in the original series. Like,
Right.
they are genuinely worried that the transporters are going to overload their last lithium crystal.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting. Like in the Next Generation, they kind of treat the transporters like they're just, they're just there, really.
I think that's why I like this. That the ships, the difference between Enterprise, the first Enterprise and the Enterprise D, like that episode of Next Generation of when Scotty, is in Next Generation because he's blah blah blah, and he's comparing like when I was walking on my Enterprise, I could tell what speed the ship was moving by the feel of the deck plates. Now it's carpeted and it's beautiful and everything's and you got fake things. You can create my ship and turn this bloody thing off. And I love that episode because it really does give you a sense of that cowboy diplomacy is the terminology that they kind of invented in Star Trek. They mention it a lot in the sixth movie, but they also mention it in the episode of when Leonard Nimoy's on Next Generation, the 2 episodes he's on. And those episodes were timed as a promotion for Star Trek 6.
Yeah, people
they
don't
came out at the
realize
same time.
That they were filming the Star Trek movies and the Next Generation concurrently to each other. Will Wheaton actually has a story about an interaction with Kirk that he had, but we'll eventually get to him.
I'm sure it was wonderful because Shatner's such a great guy.
Yeah,
he's better than he used to be, but I think there was a time where he was way too impressed with himself. He's probably still too impressed with himself, but I think he's more open.
Which is hilarious. The most recent thing I've seen him in was a Christmas Horror Story where he played a radio host and just was like negative the whole time, which makes sense.
We also get computer voice again.
Yes.
Like
Majel Barrett?
Gene Roddenberry's wife.
Yeah.
And
she's just all over the place in this.
She is the wife of the boss.
Yeah.
She's not bad, especially like later on in TNG. She's hilarious.
She's hilarious, and she's hilarious when she's on Deep Space Nine as well.
Yeah.
And in the next episode that we won't get to today, that episode that is really important. I hope that you guys are moving along with Strange New Worlds, because I think the next episode is like kind of ties into Strange New Worlds quite well. But she was a beautiful woman in this. Like when she was younger, she was beautiful. Like like she was an incredibly attractive woman, and and a very good actress. Like she's very good in this episode that we're going to get to after next week, the next time we record. This episode's frustrating, because the actress who plays Eve, she's playing it like she's like some country woman on the prairie, and it's just like, and I get it. It's like, but I just feel like and the other 2 women are just awful people, and the miners are just like stereotypes of like it just oh my god like it just there's so many cool things in this episode like that are fun, but then every time they
yeah, it's just it's just so like especially when they're on the planet with the miners, they're like, oh, why don't you, I guess the loser just gets me, and it's like
again, it feels like something you wouldn't watch it on on I don't know, like whatever the Ponderosa Bonanza. Like I felt like this was a plot from Bonanza that this guy comes to town and the Bonanza people have to take care of it. Like it just Shatner's kind of like out of his Captain Kirk's kind of out of his element a little bit because he can't really do anything, and he's trying to do the right thing, and she's totally into him, and he's not into her at all. He's like, you think I'm not. I got the ship to command. I'm not that. She's in love with him, which is a thing that happens. Every woman falls in love with Captain Kirk or Mr. Spock on the show. But clearly, like he wasn't like he felt for her, but he wasn't into her at all in my mind.
No. He
would have done her if he got the opportunity, but I don't think he would have. He's not. I'm like, listen, honey, I don't need a wife. I got a whole thing I got to deal with.
He recognized her beauty, but that's it. Like I think that was an important like distinction between him and his men, really, because like him and Scotty and the navigator whose name I forget.
Yeah.
And Spock's there too, but I'll get into that in a second. they're on the transporter pad and they're just completely dumbstruck, like, and just not saying anything at all. And Spock's just kind of, he's really expressive in this episode for some reason. Like, he's like amused. Like,
he's amused at humanity by this episode. And I think that again, another great performance by Nimoy, taking something as simple as Spock's not affected. And I guarantee you that it wasn't scripted, that Spock finds this amusing.
Yeah.
The frailties of humans. That, no, I think that he just, like, Nimoy's just such a good actor. He's like Spock. He understood that character to the very end. He understood this character so well, and nobody could. The character would have never been anything if it wasn't Leonard Nimoy. I mean, he's just the right actor for the right time, and it's just, I think that he probably had a lot of fun in this episode, kind of doing things that he just kind of played up himself.
Yeah, he's just like smirking the entire time is there.
Like shaking his head like, these stupid men.
He didn't even bother answering Kirk. He's just having too much fun just like watching
he's
those
watching
two.
that scene, right? I know like the scene where he's just kind of giggling in a sense, like when Spock and Kirk and McCoy are discussing, like, are they really that beautiful? Yeah. And McCoy is that interesting, like, a pound for, like, they sense there's something afoot here. Like, they're smart enough to realize that something's not right, you know?
Yeah, like, they're like, even McCoy is just like, we see it with Kirk. He's just like completely just like the first time we see these women, like, everybody's dumbstruck. The first time Kirk sees them, he's caught on the back foot, but he's like straight to business anyway. And the same thing happens with McCoy, because like his medical curiosity overwhelms whatever he was kind of thinking about her at the time, because like he's like, he just gets distracted by his medical equipment. Like, he very much just like...
And it's weird, and obviously there's supposed to be a difference between Eve and the other two women. And the other two women are more opportunists, and they're just trying to make money or get whatever, they marry a rich guy. Where she's really looking for something more, because she was in a terrible situation, and she is confident. And I think Kirk doesn't even really find the other two women that attractive, because because I will say that probably the concept is that he kind of sees through the magic, so to speak, and the only reason he doesn't necessarily like Eve, but I think he definitely like feels for her and he wants to help her because he feels like she's caught up in something. But clearly, because again, it's more he's seeing through, which is why I think he realized there's something more afoot here.
Yeah.
You know, where the other guys are like, "Oh my God, they're hot," and but to be honest, there's a lot of stupid guys your age that worry about, because obviously that's why Instagram exists.
Yeah.
So, so really we haven't come that far since the 1960s. So.
Yeah. I mean, at least we get like a decent at least we kind of get a decent conclusion. Like it really was about confidence, which is like, for anybody, it's important. Like he mentioned that the Venus drug, it works on men and women.
Right.
Like, there's just a difference that can be made if you just carry yourself a little bit more proudly and, have, put your shoulders back, stand up straight, all that stuff.
Right.
And that's kind of what the episode was trying to get at. I think they could have played with that a little bit more.
Right.
Maybe like backed off on the weird, like, kind of, a woman's goal is to be a wife kind of thing.
Right.
A little bit. Could have definitely backed off on that, but I think the overall message was pretty solid.
Yeah, and then there's the, I think you got it there. I think that's pretty much. And then that's when they come back and they just kind of have that conversation and, I forget the last scene, what happens in the last scene when they're on the bridge.
Well, so I have a question, and maybe you guys can elaborate for me. Is at the end when he leaves her with
whatever his name is,
minor guy,
who looks weirdly familiar.
He does look weirdly familiar.
He's in a bunch of stuff.
Is she content with being there with him?
That's what it seems like.
It seems like they actually kind of start to respect like each other, and that's actually a relationship that would develop.
Well, because to me it seems like she is really, really against it, because she obviously really likes Kirk,
Right.
and she doesn't want to be there at all. And then he comes there and he's just like, "Oh, it's okay, you'll be fine." And then she just kind of is like, "Okay, whatever," and just stays.
We don't really know too
And I
much
don't
about
know,
like.
I don't know if that's like on purpose
I don't.
or if she
My
is
feeling
okay with
is
being
that
there.
she wants. The line is, she'd like to stay at least for a day, so we can talk. We don't know for sure that she stayed. We don't know what happened, what's transpired within that day. We also don't know what happened with the other two because they do say that they can get out of it if they want. Those two other guys, if they're choosing to get, because the drugs are going to wear off for those other two women, and those guys are going to be like, oh, what the hell? Like, or they're going to just, Harry, I'm sure, had to tell them, by the way, I kind of tricked you, give back the money, so to speak. So my impression is, at the very least, Harry and the two other girls are on the ship. And they're being brought to wherever they're going to be brought. Like I think Eve may have chose to stay with Ben because she actually kind of likes him and he kind of liked her once they kind of got through the bullshit.
Yeah, well, because at first he was like, I don't know about this. But then I think after like actually seeing her, he was like, okay, you know what? Honestly,
This
I
is
might be able
what
to be
she
okay with
really is what I'm really looking for.
Yeah, Eve.
Right.
Eve actually says that, like, she utters a line that makes it clear that she's kind of over Kirk. She's like, Kirk's already married,
Right.
you know? So,
Kirk's like, okay, good. Well, thank God for that because.
Oh,
Yeah.
and then he
I
says
was
that
gonna
line.
move down here and
Yeah.
start hanging my pans up outside in
I'm
the
already
sand.
married.
You know,
to
like
the
you know.
Enterprise.
yeah, I think she says like he's got a lady up in orbit or something
Right,
like that.
right.
I think like they don't explicitly say they're leaving orbit just yet. Like,
No.
so like they might stay there a couple of days. You
It
know.
sounded like they were at first. They probably have to get the lithium crystals installed and charged and do all whatever they have to do, sci stuff. I do like that one scene where like Scotty's kind of like, you know, you're using the sensors and that's really burning out. I don't have them, Scotty.
Yeah.
I tried, but I didn't. And then he turns back. Sorry about that. Got me some slack, man. And I do like that when Kirk screws up. Because he did it with her in a previous episode, and in this one he kind of like he apologizes to Bones. Like when he goes off the handle, like it's just Kirk being Kirk. And as a teacher that would often kind of yell at his students every once in a while when he got a little stressed out, and then come back and apologize to his students. Maybe I got that from Captain Kirk. So
Yeah. Well.
not a great episode, not the worst.
Yeah,
There's certainly worse episodes of Star Trek to come.
Yes.
But this is not. It's not my favorite, and it's probably again, it's not an episode that I've watched
Yeah.
in recent years. But
Yeah,
know.
I mean, most of what I liked about the episode was entirely like technical and societal
Sure.
details that we expunge upon during this episode.
yeah, you do get a sense that, like you said, there's a bigger universe there, and not everything's not Starfleet. And that's one of the reasons why when you go to Star Wars, that like the Star Wars universe is kind of fun because you've got the military crap going on, but then you got guys like Han Solo just flying around, and the scum of villainry of Mos Eisley Spaceport, and we get a little bit of that sometimes in Star Trek, like when you go to K7, and you get some episodes like this where we kind of see civilian ships, so to speak, that are just kind of like, and people just colonizing planets, and that's that's a thing where ships just like kind of
Homesteaders,
which
really.
is pretty much again how America kind of developed. First people just kind of came across on the Mayflower or whatever, and they came to the United States, or it wasn't even the United States yet, just America, or the New World. And then once people started to move out west, and they'd put all their stuff, and they always brought a piano with them, because every Western movie there's always a piano in the stagecoach.
saloon.
Seems like really, like of all the things you're bringing with you, you're bringing like a 1-ton piano, like a 800-pound thing in your stagecoach. Just bring more like food, just in case you have a bad winter.
Yeah. So that's probably does it for
That does it for us
well,
for
we
this
don't have the for
Our
Mud's
next
Women.
episode, when we come back, will be What Little Girls Are Made Of,
Yep. And so what little girls are made
which
of
is a nurse, the first real heavy Nurse Chapel. We've seen Nurse Chapel before, but this is a great exposition story for Nurse Chapel. There's some really. I watched this episode last night. I can't wait to get to it because I like this episode a lot.
Yeah, let me just see what the episode after that would be. That would be Miri. Oh, well, I don't like that episode.
It's interesting.
It's interesting.
There's some
It's-
lazy stuff in that
It's
episode.
it's kind of
That's the episode with kids, right?
Yeah, it's got like a moral message, but you know, when we get to it, we'll like you know,
You kind of get into like the Peter Pan sort of thing.
It's an interesting episode because of the disease aspect of it, and you know, like kind of the consequences of the adults making bad decisions, so to speak. So there's a bigger story with that. You know, like that's a weird episode because they're like they're there a while. There's a lot that happens on that episode. You know, there's a lot to unpack in that episode. It's a different type of episode.
Yep. So, and if you got any feedback on either of those episodes, remember
What's the
that's
email again?
DoubleFistPunchPodcast@yahoo.com.
Follow our socials.
Yep, follow our socials. Listen to us on Spotify.
Now that I have my cosplay outfit, I might make a video
Yeah.
if I can find some time.
Yeah. Let's make videos
And I
now.
go home and drink my Saurian Brandy, and that's it. And then I find a better glue because I just broke the glue. But
All right.
so
Well, we'll
thank
see you next
Great
time.
episode. Thanks for producing, Julian.
Yes, thank you as always to Julian. I am Rick. This
And
is
I'm
Rich.
Rick.
Yes. And remember.
Oh, God.
Well,
I don't know what we're doing. Bye.
Bye.
Bow, bow.